Okay, I think we'll make a start. So a warm welcome to everybody to the April edition of Tech Wednesday. It's hard to believe that we're in April already, as everybody seems to have forgotten what month it is, what day it is, and who knows where we are at any one time. So thank you ever so much for joining us for our Tech Wednesday monthly catch-up. For those of you who are joining us for the very first time, a quick overview. So Tech Wednesday is our monthly tech campus meetup. Now, obviously, we can't meet up right now, so we are doing our virtual online webinar, and this is our second attempt at it. So like you, I'm fastly becoming accustomed to the new way of working and living. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll get through this evening without any technical glitches. Throughout the evening, you can tweet away. Make sure you use the hashtag TechWeds in anything that you are posting on social. This obviously helps us keep it all in the same place, so that myself, Dan and Virginia, our two speakers for this evening, are able to come back to you guys on any questions you might have, any feedback, and also just to so we can all stay in the same place and get chatting amongst ourselves, keep that community going. So as I just briefly mentioned there, we've got two speakers for this evening. So first up, we're going to hear from Dan Cochran. He is going to give us a talk all about talent acquisition and B2B sales in this current crisis that we're all going through. And then we're going to hear from Virginia Driver, who is going to ask and hopefully answer the question, are you giving IP away for free? So for those of you who now are probably accustomed with Zoom and these other online platforms, you'll be able to see at the bottom of your screen a Q&A tab. So throughout the evening, we're going to have a Q&A session with the two speakers, and you can just populate there your questions that you have for them. And also, I can see a few of you already using the chat facility, which is fantastic. Any comments you have throughout the evening, just pop them in there and we'll be able to chat away between ourselves. I'm not going to take up much more of your time because I'm most definitely not the star of this show. So I'm going to quickly hand over to Dan. A little bio on Dan before we get going. So Dan and I had a conversation last week, and it was initially a 15-20 minute catch up on the phone. And I found myself an hour later still having this conversation with Dan because he just filled me with all this knowledge and all this experience. So he's actually absolutely no short of an expert in his field of talent acquisition and B2B sales. So over the last 10 years, he's worked with an impressive number of over 300 corporate companies, and has recently changed his focus on helping tech startups to scale up their business. On top of that impressive knowledge, Dan also writes and produces his own music. So that music that you heard there in the welcome was one of Dan's own pieces. So again, if you're interested in on that, I'm sure he'll be more than happy to have a conversation around that following his talk. So I'm going to hand over to you, Dan, because as I said, absolute expert, no more hearing from me. So a virtual round of applause, please, for Dan.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Great. Yeah, thank you so much. Hopefully this won't take an hour because I've been told it's a 10-minute slot. And so I'll try and keep it nice and concise for you. But let me just work out how to share my screen. There we go. Can you see that? Someone give me a thumbs up. Yes, great. Okay. So look, I'll try and keep this really brief, but thanks ever so much for the kind introduction. That's really nice of you, apart from the fact that it took an hour, which makes it sound like I'm long-winded. But today we're going to keep it concise. I really wanted to reach out to people and to give you something that you can use within your businesses around the spheres of talent acquisition and B2B sales. So really briefly, I run Reed Mace Solutions. I'm director and founder. We offer basically a brand new talent acquisition solution, which is aimed specifically at founders and venture capitalists of scaling tech startups, who predominantly they're small businesses who lack an internal HR function, but they want to spend less money on recruitment, but still hiring the best talent, but they want to do it themselves. So that's what we do. We provide a mix of consultancy plus software in order to get them ready to do their own talent acquisition. And while we're doing that, I also get the fun of working on their key strategic and urgent hires. So recently, for example, I worked on a really cool project with a MarTech startup where I hired a chairman for them, a non-executive director position, a CFO, and then I looked at a business development director role, for example. I do that whilst I'm helping them to gain the competencies to do their own talent acquisition. I'm really interested, actually. I can see people are chatting, but it'd be great if you could put a little bit about what your business does. Just give us an elevator pitch in the chat, maybe, of what your business does, and I'll have a look at that. And when I'm going through this, I'll see if I can give you some specific advice to what it is that you're doing. As you can see at the bottom, I've put my Twitter and my LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me and to engage. Let's have a chat about anything you want. Always happy to hear from you. So the agenda for today. I'll briefly tell you about me, although Stephanie's done a fantastic job of that. So she's covered most of the points that I was going to cover, but that's fine. That means I can spend less time on that. And then we're going to talk very briefly. We've got one slide on talent acquisition and one slide on sales. And I'm going to give you 3 key takeaways for each of those, which you might want to be doing if you're not already doing it in your businesses at the moment. So about me. Stephanie's already given this away, but 300. What's the purpose of me putting that there? Well, I've worked on over 300 projects with companies in the last 10 plus years. 16 is actually the number of years that I've had a career. So I've been in business for 16 years, spanning both B2B sales, recruitment, and people-based services, which is distinctly different. If anyone wants to talk about that, then I'd love to, but I'm not going to cover that off today. I'm just going to stick to the core things that we want to talk about. And 5, as Stephanie kindly plugged my music, really appreciate that. If people want to hear more about that, I'll tell you more about it. I could talk all day about that, but I'm not going to today. But 5 is actually the number of albums that I've produced, and the 5th I released on my 40th birthday last August, which I put a nice picture of here, which Stephanie kindly played at the beginning, Mr. Monkey and a Magic Banana. There you go, a concept piece. So a couple of things about me. I've said I've worked with a lot of businesses. I've been in boardrooms up and down the country for the last 15 years, consulting with companies and selling to companies, predominantly within tech and software. And as you can see, I've worked with a huge array of businesses, large from KPMG, PwC, RBS, right down to small companies that you may or may not have even heard of. Nowadays, I specifically focus on tech startups because I love tech. I particularly love future tech, and I really love being able to add value to a business where they don't really have the resources to do it themselves. So I'm also a thought leader. You'll see my stuff across social media, Twitter, LinkedIn, and I write a lot about sales and talent acquisition, give out a lot of tips so that particularly founders of tech startups who I tend to work with, I tend to be a partner to CEOs so that they can pick up bits and pieces on how to run their businesses better, how to grow quicker, and how to be more professional in sales. This is really quick mini case study, if you like. I really wanted to highlight an example of the depth of projects that I've worked on. So this is a while ago, albeit 2010. I introduced Staples, B2B arm of Staples into the UK, and hired their entire SME field sales division in 1 month. It was 15 people. That team, in money terms, went from 0 to 6 million the first year, $15 million in the second year, and $32 million in the third year of revenue. So those are the kind of projects that I've worked on over the years. Just another aside about me and ReedMade Solutions, we're big on giving back to the local community, and I am big on bridging the gap between education and employment, because I work with a lot of future tech companies, and I think it's really important that we educate the youth of today about the changing jobs markets within tech. And it's massive. The difference is massive. If you go into any supermarket nowadays, and I say this regularly to the children at the schools, you go into a supermarket nowadays, you go to the tills, what do you notice? There are no people. It's all run by robots and machines, and and that's the way the world is going. And the jobs market is changing massively. So working with companies at the forefront of that tech, I'm in a really privileged position to be able to kind of take some of those exciting projects and talk to children about them, get them enthused about artificial intelligence and data science and the future of the jobs marketplace. So that's enough about me. So let's start with talent acquisition. I'm really intrigued as to whether people know, whether they understand what talent acquisition is and what the difference between talent acquisition and recruitment is. Because a lot of people that I speak to say, Dan, it's the same thing. I say, no, it isn't. There's a fundamental difference. And I've done this quick table here to explain the difference. So the key thing is this: talent acquisition is the field. Recruitment is a subset of talent acquisition. So talent acquisition seeks to align the hiring of talent to the strategy of the company. So think about a startup where you may have borrowed 4 million, 5 million, 10 million. You may be at Series A, Series B. It doesn't matter. Essentially, you would have promised a return and a valuation to your investors. What talent acquisition does is it looks at that return and it says, how are we going to meet that with people, with the talent, with the skills? And how do we align the hiring strategy to the organizational goals and strategy? And that's key, because recruitment focuses on filling a vacancy. What it doesn't do is it looks at the order in which we're going to hire. We're going to hire top down, we're going to hire bottom up. And it doesn't look at, is this role going to fulfill a strategic position? You'd assume that's already been done, but 9 times out of 10, especially small businesses, it hasn't. The other key thing about talent acquisition is it prioritizes low cost and high impact methods of hiring. And what that means is, if you're doing talent acquisition properly, rather than just saying, I need a person, let's get a person, if you're doing it properly, then you will use a methodical process which prioritizes spending less money and getting the best people. Whereas recruitment prioritizes speed, particularly when working with a recruitment agency, for example, on what I'd call a no-win, no-fee basis, because everything about that will prioritize speed of filling that vacancy. And that doesn't always work in your favor. So talent acquisition is a continual process throughout the life of your business, whereas recruitment is an ad hoc process as and when you want to hire somebody. So here's my top 3 tips to make the most of your time in lockdown regarding talent acquisition. I've tried to keep this simple. I can expand on it, and if anyone wants to discuss it afterwards, feel free. If anybody wants to put a question, then also feel free to put a question in. But essentially, number 1, skills retention. Talent acquisition is not recruitment. It's not about the person per se. It's about the skills, the talent, and the knowledge that those people have. So my key question to anybody who's running a business, especially in a tech startup, is this: if your people leave, what skills would they take with them that you can't replace in your business? What knowledge would they take with them that you can't replace in your business? I'll give you an example. Sales is a convenient example of this. Salespeople will know all your customers. Salespeople will have relationships with all your customers. They'll also know the marketplace, your competitors, etc. If you don't have a way of retaining those skills in your business, and I'm not saying keeping that person in your business, I'm talking about keeping those skills, whether it be from technology, storing in a CRM, etc. When that person leaves, how detrimental is that going to be to your business? And the reason that this is so important to be doing it during lockdown is a lot of companies will be experiencing furlough, redundancies, etc. And that creates uncertainty, and that means people will be looking to move jobs. So some of your people may decide to leave for various reasons. What you need to be doing right now, this is my top takeaway for skill retention, is you need to have a list of all of your employees, and you need to be asking yourself the question, what skills would they be taking with them? And if you don't know, you need to be making sure that you're sitting down with them or their managers and working it out. And then you need to come up with a plan for how to retain those skills as best as possible. On top of that, you need, of course, to be making sure that you're looking after your people, keeping them happy so that they don't leave, but you can't safeguard against all of that. What you can do is retain skills. Number 2, people still awake. Hopefully people are still awake and with me. Number 2, succession planning. So most people have heard of this, but very few people put it into practice, particularly in small businesses. The key thing here is succession planning is critical, as is development of your people. If a manager leaves, do you have somebody who can step up into their position, for example? Now, if you're a small business, you may not have that. You may have a flat layer, so it may not apply to you quite as much. But as your business grows, as you scale up, it definitely will. And the key thing here, again, is about retention of people, but also the skills, the talent, and the knowledge that they bring with them. So you need to be looking at, are we, if we need a manager and we don't have a manager team, are we going to hire externally, or have we got a plan for developing people up into those positions? And now is a great time to be looking at, as the business grows, how's the headcount going to grow? How's the team going to grow? And what could the succession planning be? Because if you don't have it, people at the bottom will leave because they've got nowhere to go. Number 3. This one, I don't know how many people do this, but I'd be intrigued if anybody actually does it. But if you think about it, what I do is I help companies who maybe rely on third parties like recruitment agencies to do their hiring. But from a strategic point of view, if you want to act like them so that you don't need to rely on third parties, one of my top tips here, have you mapped out the marketplace? And what I mean by that is, do you know who all your competitors and people who are selling similar things into similar marketplaces, into the same decision makers that you're selling to? Do you know all those companies? And do you know the people in your competitors who are in those roles? So for example, sales, I'll pick it because it's relevant. Your sales guys will be going out and selling to RBS, for example. And it may be that your competitors are also trying to sell to RBS. Now, if you lose the deal and your competitors win, your salespeople will know almost certainly from the contact the name of the salesperson at your competitor's business. That allows you to speak to RBS and say, look, why didn't we win? Was it product? Was it something to do with the way that we sold? What was it? Was it pricing? It could have been any of these things. And who was it at the competitor that sold you the solution you decided to go with, and why? And you map those people out. And you keep that list, and you court those people over a period of time, and that is true talent acquisition. You're mapping out the best people in the industry, and next time you're looking to hire, you've got their phone number, you've added them on LinkedIn, you've had a conversation with them, and you can bring them into the business. And you don't have to have a HR function to do this. The strategy comes from the top. How am I doing? Are there any questions coming up? Because I can't see any questions. Okay, let's move on, because Virginia's chomping at the bit. She's got some awesome points to talk about. I can see she's waiting. So look, sales. 3 ways to make the most out of your time in lockdown. And just so you know, I do consider myself an expert in B2B sales. And I've spent a lot of time researching the different methodologies, the best practices, and of course I do a lot of selling myself, and I'm constantly striving to be the best at that, and I'm constantly learning. I think you do need to keep learning. So I have a number of really senior sales contacts who I've worked with over the years, and I've put in a few calls before this session to sound out some ideas and to get some spin on it. This pricing strategy, this is massive. So top 3 ways to make the most of your time in lockdown, sales-wise. 1, look at your pricing. If you're in a boom market, then things might be going really well. You probably don't need to, but things have changed. The landscape will change for you, and if it doesn't, it will change for your customers. So you need to look at your pricing strategy. The key point here, I spoke to a gentleman who I've worked with for a long time called Patrick at a business, Sales for Startups, they're called. And he's a VP of sales for hire, if you like, who works on a number of projects specifically with startups. I work with them on a number of projects, which they do the sales strategy piece, I do talent acquisition strategy piece. It works really well. And he said to me, the key thing is you need to be flexible with your pricing, because you're going to lose some customers. All of us are going to experience that to some extent. You know, it might be loads, it might be a few, but you are going to potentially lose some customers to the climate. However, if you make it easy for them to flex down when the chips are down for them, and you understand their business, then when things pick back up, they will stay with you and they'll grow and you'll get more customers. So if you haven't looked at your pricing strategy, and there's a number of ways of doing that I'm happy to chat about, you need to look at your pricing strategy. I'm not saying offer new customers a lower price, absolutely not. Offer them more value, but you definitely need to address your pricing strategy to flex with the times and the challenges your customers are going through. Number 2, find new market sweet spots. So unless you're selling, I put on here, unless you're selling respirators to the NHS, you know, you're going to find that things have changed a little bit. And the best way to react to this is you need to have an industry segmentation focus on your clients and prospects. Sounds obvious, but not many people do it. In good times, in fact, anybody that's in business will just look almost anywhere for their customers, because businesses, you know, it can be anywhere, but the sweet spots have changed. So you need to look at the sales strategy for the industries that you're targeting, and you need to change that now for the segments that are working well. I'll give you a couple, and I've done some research on this, and obviously, you know, from my own experience, but I've spoken to quite a few people in the last couple of weeks, and what's working, what isn't. In a downturn, the private sector always drops to a large extent and the public sector increases. So public sector is obvious. Selling into healthcare, if you've got a really necessary solution, you know, for example. Engineering construction is doing really well as well at the moment. Logistics is doing really well. FMCG, food and drink. Look at the markets and focus on the ones that are flourishing at the moment, and spend, you know, look after your customers, but spend less time in the areas where they're not making as much money. Number 3, sales funnel basics. So it's called a sales funnel for a reason, right? It's wide at the top and it's very slim at the bottom. The more you put in, the more you get out. For me, it comes down to one question. Things may be a little bit tougher, they may not, but if they are a little bit tougher, actually, you're not going to annoy people if you've got a relevant solution, if you go to them with something of value and you approach them in the correct way. However, if you expect everything to drop and you stop contacting decision makers, then you're not going to sell anything. It's that simple. So my question would be, you know, how many decision makers within the new sweet spots that we've looked at, with the new pricing strategy that we've now looked at, how many decision makers have you contacted? Because there's going to be a lesser proportion of them in this environment that are going to potentially purchase from you. Therefore, you need to increase your activity, whether you do that by email, by phone, you know, the sales strategy. I'm happy to discuss that all day long, but that's down to you. But essentially, it will always come down to that one question. How many decision makers have you contacted? And it's not just a weekly thing. It needs to be, you know, you need to try it for 30 days. If you increase that activity and you target your sales team, or if you're doing it yourself, target yourself on contacting more people. Don't worry so much about the sales targets. Things are volatile. That may drop, it may increase, but the sheer fundamental is if you're not contacting more people, you're not going to make more sales. And there's the sales funnel, as you can see. So look, thank you very much. I'm sorry if I've gone on. Hopefully I'm okay for time. But look, thank you ever so much for listening. I'm really happy to answer any questions if there are any questions.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Dan. I will give you a clap just so you can hear.
Thank you.
Okie doke. So we will do a quick Q&A session now. Let's have a look. Okay. So first question is, how do I stop my talent from going elsewhere during this crisis?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, that's a brilliant question. I'm really happy to answer that. I think, look, as part of my job, I work on a number of hiring processes, and I can tell you right now, factually, that in the last 2 weeks, I've spoken to at least 20 people who are who've been put on furlough, and they've all asked me, Dan, should I be looking at a new job? So look, it's difficult. It's difficult to retain your people, but essentially, one, you need to tell them that you love them, right? You need to tell them that you love them. You need to tell them that they're valued, and you need to back that up with your flexibility in how you manage and how you target them. Now's the time to show them that you know that you're a person, that you're human, and that regardless of the stresses that are happening in the business, as a leader, that you value them and to keep them there. Number two, you need to get, you need to, when you do your talent mapping, which we mentioned in the talent acquisition piece, when you do talent mapping, part of the information that you should be gathering is what other people are paying their staff. Because no matter whether you like it or not, if you're paying less than your competitors, then they'll be doing that and they'll be taking your people. So you need to look at that. If you can't afford to pay them the money, I understand it, but if you pay less than market rate, then there's always the risk that they're going to move. The free fruit bowls and all the rest of it are nice to have, but essentially it will come down to their emotions. You need to check in with them regularly, and you need to be having human conversations with them, and you need to look at the succession planning, which is what we talked about as well, because if they've got no career path and if they're not learning anything, then they're less likely to stay with you, and you need to have that conversation with them in your one-to-ones. How do you feel? How do you feel we're doing as a company? Are we supporting your personal goals? And do you feel like you're learning things and that you've got a career here? You need to be honest with them and have those conversations.
Yeah, no, definitely. I completely agree. Being on this end of it and being the employee, those kind of things are the most reassuring right now. So definitely good advice. Okay, another question. From a talent acquisition point of view, what is critical right now?
From a talent acquisition point of view, what's critical right now? Well, to be honest, that's a difficult one to answer because it depends on where your business is at and what your plans are. But I would say, look, my key message is talent acquisition is more important than just looking at filling seats. And a lot of people will be losing people and furloughing, etc. But from talent acquisition point of view, the key thing for me is you must have a strategy which is a robust strategy, which has a process and a methodology which prioritizes low cost, high impact, and is clearly aligned to your organizational goals and strategy. And I'm talking about numbers, because that's what it comes down to at the end of the day, guys. Are we going to hit our numbers? You may be pre-revenue, but at some point you're going to have to hit those valuations and start paying people back and getting what they like to call the market traction. So yeah, the key thing is with talent acquisition that you've got a policy, that you are looking at a long-term strategy for how you get the best people in and how you reach your organizational goals.
Super. Okay, we haven't got any more written questions, so if anybody has got one, obviously feel free to pop it in the chat. If anybody would like to verbally ask a question, you can raise your virtual hand And I invite you to do so right now. If you do have a question, give it a moment. Nobody's had the usual beers beforehand, it seems. But okay, we'll leave it there for now then, Dan, and we'll recap at the end. But again, thank you ever so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Okay, so I am now going to pass over to Virginia. So Virginia is an intellectual property practitioner with over 20 years experience in protecting innovation for global companies and SMEs. Virginia works particularly in the tech and augmented artificial intelligence fields, and joins us today to share her expertise with our Tech Wednesday community. So if I invite you, Virginia, to share your screen with us.
Let's see if that will work. See if I can share my screen with everybody. Hello, hi, so I can see that Dan is a real expert at these because he's got a virtual background on his Zoom feed, whereas you're looking at my front room, and he has lots of very fancy text on his slides. So I've learned a few things from Dan, even if not about talent acquisition. So I've been reading about the level of innovation that's been triggered by COVID-19, and I came across an article by Peter Beach in the World Economic Forum, from hands-free door openers that can be 3D printed to basic ventilators. The COVID-19 pandemic has ushered in a new era of urgent innovation. It's reminiscent of the inventions of the Second World War, when the first digital computer and rocket technology came to the fore. Well, that may be an overstatement, but there's no question that the level of creativity that's been sparked by COVID-19 has been quite amazing. Another thing that's been ushered in with COVID-19 is a high degree of philanthropy and social cohesion. And actually, this is ironic in these days of social distancing. But in such an era, it's easy to think of monopolies as being inherently bad things. And this is a common myth. Underlying this is a fundamental misunderstanding of the role that monopolies can play in making sure that innovation is properly and philanthropically almost used. So I chose as my theme today to discuss the importance of obtaining protection for your ideas.
Virginia, sorry to interrupt your flow. Just to let you know that your screen, we can't see your presentation at the minute. I don't know whether you just want to try again.
Okay, it's on share screen. It's open. Let's try again.
Double click again. Just that's it. That's
okay.
perfect.
All right. Let's get back to this. Thanks very much.
Not that we didn't love the view of your front room, by the way.
All right, can you see my screen now? So you just had to listen to me say that slide, so maybe you took it in, because there's a lot of research that says when you're reading and listening, you don't take it in either way. So I was talking about monopolies and the role of monopolies in an era like this, and the myths that underlie monopolies. And another very common myth is that if you have an idea, your own idea, then it's yours to manage and control. So for example, if you did come up with an innovation in this terrible time, which would help in the fight against COVID-19, you could decide what you did with that. And actually, that's not right. It's a very widely spread myth. I've had academics, very, professorial, very, very intelligent people who've published papers on their own research, and they've been astonished to find that that has given away their research to anyone in the public. And that includes other companies and other people, maybe less scrupulous than yourselves, who might want to misuse that information or use it for purposes that you never considered it should be used for. Now, I'm not saying publication is a bad thing. Publication is a great thing. And publishing your ideas, particularly at the moment, is what the world needs. But you do need to think about putting in place the right kind of protection so that you retain control of your ideas. So the law provides you with ways of making sure that your idea remains your idea and remains under your control. And I've looked at this from the perspective of individuals. Now, ultimately, all innovation arises from individuals. One person or more than one person in a room creates something, potentially something of huge value. Now, after that, a company might take it up, a startup tech company. Dan was talking a lot about tech startups, and that's actually most of my current client base are startups in the tech industry. So it's an area I know very well. But those tech companies had founders. It all started with an idea or a person. And so I've thought it would be interesting to present to you the bits of law that turn you as an individual into someone special who's recognized by the law as having certain intellectual property characteristics. So the first thing you could be, if you so choose, is defined in the Patents Act. And the Patents Act defines an inventor. And an inventor is anybody who devises an invention. However, and here's the sort of small catch, you're only an inventor of an invention if you define that invention in a patent. Now, back to this first point I was making, a patent is a legal monopoly that's granted to the inventor or his successor in title. It could be your employer or company. And it can be granted for any physical device, apparatus, process, or product as long as it's new and non-obvious. And my job today isn't to go into the requirements for getting patents, how you get a patent, but it's just to alert you to the fact that unless you file a patent application, you're not actually by law classified as an inventor, although you may have invented the original idea. So it's a very common myth that goes with that. So if you're an inventor and you get a patent, then you have a monopoly, and then it's up to you what you do. And this is the really important thing. It doesn't mean that you have to use that monopoly to keep other people out of the market or to stop other people doing things. What it does mean, however, is that if somebody else is abusing your idea or using it for purposes that you didn't intend it, or using it in the current situation to make a profit, whereas your focus would be to be philanthropic with your idea, if you have a patent, it allows you to make those choices. So you could tell somebody, oh, fine, make that product, sell that product, but give the profits to charity, or give me a license royalty and I'll give those royalties to charity. So it gives you the ability as an inventor of an invention defined in a patent to have that control and make those choices. Otherwise, you've donated your idea and lost control. So the next thing that you might be, you could be the author of a design. The Registered Designs Act 1949, as it happens, still there, gives you the ability to be an author of a design. But again, you're not that special author unless you register the design. Now, a design is not the same as a patent, although it still acts as a monopoly with all the ability of choice and control that I've talked about. A design may be registered for the shape or configuration of an article. And what that means in shorthand, it's for aesthetic effects. Now, you can think about a patent as being for practical physical effects, and the design is things that make things look nice, nicer chairs, nicer tables, possibly nicer masks. So the function could be old, but the design could be new. I did include on this slide, just because I'm so interested in AI and that's where I spend most of my time, there's a piece in this act which actually even considers the case where a design might be made by a computer where there's no human author. And that's the subject of a whole other talk, which maybe I'll give one Tech Wednesday. But so moving on, these are my two monopolies, patents and registered designs. There's another class of right where you don't have to do anything. They're rights that are created automatically. So you could sit in your own front room and be an author under the Copyright Designs and Patents Act 1988. Now, you couldn't be an author under the Registered Design Act 1949 unless you registered your design, but you can be an author under this act just by sitting there and creating a new work. Now, Dan certainly falls in this act with all of his musical works that he's created. So he is an author. I'm sure he didn't know, maybe he did, that it was Copyright Act Section 9 that gave him that classification. There's another automatic right, which is again much less well known than copyright, which is a design right. So this is a sort of design right that you don't have to register. And it's also the Copyright Design and Patents Act 1988, Section 213, for those of you that are interested in these things. And this means if you create a design in your bedroom, you're automatically classified as a designer and you automatically have certain rights attached to that design. Again, I have included the bit there about computer generated designs out of specific interest, but some of you may be working with or for companies that do actually use computers to generate inventions and designs. So it's important to know the Act has considered this. There's an important difference between monopolies and the so-called copying rights. The monopolies are the ones that you have to register, and the copying rights are the ones you kind of get for free. The law just applies, even though you didn't know it was applying. However, there's a fundamental difference in how they can be utilized. You can use a monopoly right whether or not somebody has seen your idea and copied it. So even if somebody else independently came up with the same notion as you, if you have a monopoly right, you can still use it to exercise that choice. So because it was your idea and you registered a monopoly right, that gives you rights over other people that later come up with the same idea, because then it's no longer original for them, it was original to you. For the copying rights, you do need to establish that somebody has literally looked over your shoulder or heard your music or seen your drawing and reproduced it, or your design. So they're a little bit more limited in that respect. Of course, they have the massive advantage that they're automatically created and you don't have to do anything about it. So really that's the main, in terms of innovation, those are really the main special things that you can be as an individual person. There's one more I just wanted to touch on, which is trademarks. Let's not forget them. Trademarks are interesting because trademarks come about not because you have created them or invented them, although many people think that, again, it's a common myth, but because they designate your goods and services and make those goods and services uniquely distinguishable from other goods and services. So that's the Trademarks Act 1994. In that section B there, the trademark has the job of distinguishing goods and services of one undertaking from those of another undertaking, separate from copyright. So a name could have copyright, but it could also act as one of these designated signs. And this is a little bit off topic for tech companies, although they do have brands, but it's interesting to understand that actually you don't own a trademark in the same way as you owned one of these monopoly or copying rights. So and just about to close, but just to let you know that at the moment my firm is very happy to advise pro bono on any of these matters that are arising. We're happy to give a free consultation to you for your startups or individuals, anyone in the present circumstances. We all we really want to do is make sure that people are exercising their choices over their own intellectual property, not falling into the traps of just giving stuff away for free. And so, as Stephanie said, that was really my talk. Are you giving away your IP for free? And my answer is, you might be now, but you don't have to. So, any questions?
Perfect. I'll give you another round of applause. Thank you, Virginia. Thank you. So a couple of questions coming through, which is really great to see. So the first one, does the author have to be a citizen of the UK and physically present in the UK in order for Copyright Design Act 1988 to be applicable automatically?
Oh, lovely, lovely legal question there. So very interesting. Yes and no. So yes, under this act, but then there are conventions, which I would have to go and look up. The Berne Convention, I think, is one of them, but there are conventions that give reciprocal rights across different countries. So whoever asked that question, please reach out through the website, or I think Steph's going to share a link, or get in touch with me through whatever mechanism Steph can let you know. And I'd be really happy just to have a phone call with you about that.
Yeah, perfect. And that's exactly what Tech Wednesday is all about, you know, making these connections and being able to help each other out. So that would be really great if we can make that connection. As Virginia said, I will share that link very shortly, which will then entitle you to that free consultation. So another couple of questions, Virginia. Should I be trademarking my logo?
Yes, if your logo is something that is you think sets you apart and allows people to understand that what you're doing is always going to be controlled by you and distinguishes you from other people supplying similar services, that's when you need to register your logo as a trademark. Absolutely.
Awesome. What would you advise to someone who has a business idea? Would patent apply to it?
Do you want to just run that question again, Steph? So
the question's worded, what would you advise to someone who has a business idea? Would patent apply to it? So essentially, I suppose if you've just got an idea, at what point should you look at, you know, protecting that, essentially, maybe?
Yeah. I understand the question now. Yes. So what you should definitely do is seek advice about the right kind of intellectual property right. So I've run through the core different kinds. Some ideas, business ideas, are eminently suitable for patents, particularly in tech companies. Nearly all of the technology that's developed, whatever the sector, is potentially patentable if it's physical and has some technical advantage. If it isn't, if it's more around the aesthetics, then you might be looking at a design. But you should always take advice on what would be the right kind of intellectual property protection for your business idea. There will always be something, and you just need to tag it.
Okay, lovely. I think it was my pronunciation that maybe got you confused there on that question.
No, sorry, Steph, I just didn't. Yeah.
Another one we've got here is, can your patent use, can you patent the use of existing technology in a different context or sector?
Yes, you absolutely can. And a surprising number of patents are granted to what we call A+B combinations, where A and B are both individually known, but you are the person that has joined them together. And generally the test would be whether it would have been obvious to put those things together, and whether in putting them together you've come up with some technical advantage or solved an existing problem. But a very, very, very large number of patents indeed are exactly that, the use of existing technology in a different context or sector. So again, reach out. That was Hader, I think. Please reach out later if you want a quick chat.
Perfect. And then we're running out of time. It's flown really, but just quickly, a couple of questions there around costings. And maybe again, it's something that you could kind of cover on a more personal basis dependent on it, but just an overview on
Yeah, happy to give an overview, but it's so variable. But just a very quick overview. Trademarks around a couple of £100 for one trademark in this country. It gets more expensive if you go into other countries. Patents, you're more around the sort of anywhere between 3,000 and 5,000 mark for a patent application in one country. So there's a big variation in costs. But to have a brief look at your business idea and see what kind of intellectual property protection might be the best for you, doesn't always have to involve an expensive patent. And there are ways also to do kind of mini patents or provisional patents. Please reach out and just have a quick chat with us. It's free, and then you can have a much more detailed conversation to find out what's best for your business.
Perfect. Okay, well, I think we'll wrap up the questions there with Virginia. So again, another round of applause. Thank you ever so much for sharing that with us. I'm just going to quickly share my screen with you guys again. We've moved on from there. That's the link there that Virginia was talking about. So if you want to just take a screenshot or jot that down, www.pagewhite.com/free-consultation. And as Virginia said, definitely get in touch and just have that conversation. It's better to get it out there than to be sat on that idea when you could be making millions from it, essentially. So thank you ever so much. In this part of the event, we were going to hand over to you guys. I mean, we are quite short on time. But just quickly, if anybody has a topic that they'd quite like to raise, or another question they've thought of, we've got a couple of minutes. If anybody has, please feel free to pop that in the chat just now. Let's have a look. Okay, nothing specific coming through, but another question in there for you, Virginia, from a lady called Julia. So again, somebody else to make connections with. It looks like you're going to have either a long Wednesday evening or a busy Thursday tomorrow. So I'm just going to quickly wrap up. So thank you ever so much for everybody for joining us. Again, as I said, this is only our second virtual Tech Wednesday, so please do send on any feedback you have for us, or if you'd like to speak at any of the future Tech Wednesdays, then of course drop me an email, which is stephanie.finan@bruntwood.co.uk. As I say, every single month we're here for Tech Wednesday. Next month, Wednesday, 20th of May, we're actually having a Tech Nation takeover. So working closely with Naomi Nash, their community engagement manager for the West Midlands, and really exciting session there with lots of interactive exhibition going on. So I'm really excited myself to see what that's like. So please do join us. Obviously, you can register for that on the meetup page as usual. One more final thank you to the speakers. So thank you, Dan, and thank you, Virginia. I'll give you another round of applause. That's absolutely brilliant. Any final comments from you guys before we end for the evening, I suppose?
Oh, just a huge thanks. It was really enjoyable, and I've done my first one now, so very happy to come back if you want me.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, thanks for having us.
Okay, look, so a few thank yous and well done, brilliant session coming in on the chat. So thank you ever so much, guys. If anybody does want a hold of the slides that you've seen this evening, please do drop me an email as well. Just a reminder of my email address is there on your screen. And we'll make those connections for you. So thank you ever so much. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday evening, and hopefully we'll see you again next month. Cheers, guys.
Thanks very much, Steph. Thank you.
No problem. I'm going to play your Dan's lovely music to it. So you can't beat that, can you? There we go. Thanks, guys.